chills, thrills, puns, and a whole new world with its own horrors to explore every episode. The horror anthology is everywhere, from books, TV shows, films, radio shows, and the modern podcast. It is a timeless tradition, bringing contained horror to audiences looking for a good bite-sized fright. Hi, I'm Fox, any pronouns. Today, I thought it would be fun to look at some TV horror anthology shows and compare just the first episodes, see how they hold up today and how they hold up against each other, and maybe see which ones we wouldn't mind checking out more episodes of. The three shows we're discussing today are Hammer House of Horror, Tales from the Crypt, and Creepshow. But first, a word from our sponsor. The thing left behind in the home you just moved into. You are new to this place, but it is not, and it knows the crevices to hide in. It waits and watches, wondering how you will acclimate to its home, or if you must be evicted. Hammer House of Horror is, like you might have guessed, a Hammer production. The website actually has a very nice breakdown of the company's history by decade. It aired in 1980, so still retains some of the 1970s Hammer fare, horror and sex. They were no cowards. There's only ever one season, or series as they're called in Britain, with a lucky 13 episodes. I'd say that's pretty fitting. We get a full 54 minutes to delight and terrify, so let's take a look. Episode 1 is Witching Time. We open on an ominous POV and some classic Hammer nudity. It's a cold open, and then we get the credits with some lovely background music that really sets the mood. Then we're introduced to two of our main players, David, a film music composer, and Mary, an actress. She says she has to stay over that night for work. David takes it well enough.
I'm just about to come up to your death scene, dear.
As they hang up, we see Mary is having an affair. David has his suspicions, and is obviously upset, but he still takes care of Mary's horse before returning to work, trying to craft the music for the scene we saw in the opening. You can really feel how hopeless and frustrated David is. A sudden storm blows in, and the lights go out, except for the offstage lighting. The dog runs off, and he hears noises from the horse. He investigates, and finds a woman. She's babbling about having escaped something or someone, and screams at the sky. Her name is Lucinda, and she says she comes from here, from the farm they now own. She comes from the 1600s. David, naturally, has reservations about that being true. Either way, she's ecstatic about there no longer being witch-finders, being a witch and all. She tells him how in the past they were going to burn her, but she used her powers to escape, and now here she is. I gotta say, David handles this so well. He's calm, doesn't antagonize who he assumes is having some mental issues, even calmly helps her understand and not fear electricity. In a lot of horror, the guy would just be a douchebag to everyone, mean-spirited, antagonistic. I like here how he's a well-rounded dude. He's a very multifaceted guy, very human. Still compassionate while he's hurting. Also gotta say, I love Lucinda. She's a blast. Unhinged, a witch, enthralled at the modern age as much as she's afraid. David locks her in a bedroom, not to harm her like she thinks, but to call up Charles, his friend who's a doctor, and is fucking his wife. He takes Charles to examine her, but when they unlock the door and go in, Lucinda is gone. Charles blames him drinking on medicine and gives him a shot to help him relax through the night, while listening to his fears that Mary is sleeping around. When he goes to bed, however, Lucinda is back. She refuses to listen to him, thinking Charles was the witch-finder, and we get more of that good Hammer nudity as she tortures him. They have sex, but it really feels not fully consensual on poor David's part. Mary returns in the morning. She doesn't believe him about Lucinda either, but is disturbed by scratch marks on his back. She also finds a dead bird in the bed she blames on David. I really think it's interesting he buries it. Or attempts to before it suddenly turns into Mary for a moment as Lucinda's cackling echoes in the background. She's fine, minus the weird cut she got as David struck her corpse. Lucinda messes with her next, water turning to blood and trying to drop a bust upon her. Mary blames David, who literally just came inside. Mary is prepared to leave, until Lucinda strikes while they're both in the room. I like that the show doesn't prolong her disbelieving him, and doesn't have her try and rationalize this new strange event. She even apologizes. Then she goes horseback riding while David naps. I think it's the next day, but still a strange choice. In her defense, she does go to talk with a priest for an exorcism, leaving David alone for Lucinda to, this time, just straight up rape. I do appreciate how well the rape is handled. The framing fully shows how miserable David is, how much he hates fully what was done to him. It's really just a moment or two, but it's handled well. Mary goes to Charles for help, and he proves how much of a piece of shit he is by not helping in the slightest. I love Mary's growth as she tells him off, threatening to expose their secret if he ever comes near her again. Lucinda attacks, knocking her off her horse and putting her in the hospital for several days. When she returns, David is not doing the greatest. And the state of the bedroom really says it all. There's a figure in her image with something sharp stuck in its side. She removes them all, feeling every pull, and finally starts to feel relief. Then David pushes and locks her into the cellar. He's obviously under Lucinda's control. Scenes of him hacking away at brush and starting a burn pile interwoven with Mary attempting to escape. She finally does manage, sneaking to the barn, only to run back inside to try and phone for help. David finds she's escaped and gives chase, but Mary manages to trick him. Then Lucinda is there, and it's the final show-off. It's a tense scene, fire climbing and threatening to consume David. Mary overpowers her with a different element, water. Freed, David throws the figure now made to represent Lucinda into the fire, and we hear her screams. What a great start to an anthology. This was so well crafted, and certainly makes me want to continue with this series. Gorgeous cinematography, brilliant shots that hint at so much to the audience before they're revealed to the characters, and the suspense. Witching Time was chilling, subverted my expectations, had great characters to root for. The acting was top-notch. Lucinda was an absolute delight. I'd give this a good 4 happy foxes. Now let's take a look at episode 1 of Tales from the Crypt. Unlike Hammer House of Horror, which ran roughly an hour, this was a 30-minute show. More like 26, leaving room for commercials. We open up immediately on our rotting short king, the man of the hour himself, icon and legend, the Crypt Keeper. From the original comics to the early 90s cartoon to even a fucking game show, we love to see this decaying host of horrors and humors. He introduces the story we're about to see unfold.
Our story is about a man with nobler ambitions. He likes to kill human pests, and he does it in front of an audience. Now that's entertainment. So hang on to your hats, kiddies. This one's a real shocker.
The man who was death follows a modern executioner, Niles Talbot. He's the guy who flips the switch for the electric chair, and he does it gleefully. He sees himself as the righteous dark arm of the law, doing what others cannot bring themselves to do, but knows it has to be done. He narrates what happened with Charlie, the convict who's currently being dragged to the chair. It's a tragic tale of a black man worked to the bone, just wanting a raise, and finally snapping on his boss when it's denied. There's so much left unsaid about how capitalism breaks people down, of possible but likely discrimination in the workplace, of coping with substances like alcohol, which is common, but can be quite consequential. There's also unspoken commentary here about all the police, the executioner, everyone else is white, leading a black man to death. But all Talbot focuses on is that a man took another man's life, and he's ready to do the same. Talbot is not shy about the gruesome details, telling us about what will happen as the electricity rushes through Charlie, as Charlie screams and begs for mercy. The witness is watching stoically.
People tell me most executioners never look the prisoners in the eye. Afraid they're gonna get spooked or something. Not me. I always look.
The governor does not call to pardon Charlie. The flip is switched. Charlie is executed. Talbot is full of quips.
They say electric current's so fast the brain gets cooked just as soon as the switch is throwed. Prisoner never feels a thing. Boy, I'd hate to think that was true.
Talbot is very happy with his life. For 12 years now, he's been doing this. Until today. Charlie was the last execution as the death penalty gets abolished. As you might guess, this does not sit well with Talbot. He's tossed aside by the prison who doesn't have another job for him, and finds himself at the bar he frequents, talking to the park keep who's talking him up about how chicken shit the powers that be are for firing him, for removing the death penalty, laughing at Talbot's idea to make all the other prisoners watch each electrocution instead. Talbot gets really worked up, narrates about how we're all pregnant with death, it's all around us, inside us, waiting. Talbot sits in on a murder trial that gets thrown out due to shoddy police work. Instead of being upset at the police, who have a history of not doing proper due diligence, of not caring about victim or civilian or perpetrator, not caring about the laws they're supposedly expected to uphold, Talbot gets an idea. An already radicalized man takes matters into his own hands. Make no mistake, the man who walked free was a homophobe and a monster. But it's obvious Talbot doesn't care about a miscarriage of justice. He thinks himself above the law. He sees himself as some angel of death, the only one strong enough to do what must be done. And so he does it, setting up a trap to electrocute his victim. No way he stops there. A couple is declared innocent. He corners them in an extravagant shower that night, this time making sure they know he's there. What they say makes it sound like maybe they did kill the guy's wife, but who can really know? People say a lot of things under duress, and they don't get long to speak before he does the deed. Next is a dancer acquitted for murdering her boyfriend. We get this information in a flash, as a newspaper showing just part of the story gets stepped on. The show is just reinforcing what we already know. Talbot doesn't actually care. He even goes on a small tirade about how he doesn't hate women. They've always been easy for him to go out in bed whenever he wanted, and in the same breath, saying how they're all desperate for love, talking down about all women and how you can't give them what they want. You can't fall in love with them, or else then they'll leave you, or cut off your balls. Talbot goes backstage, preparing to take her life. We don't hear her side. We don't hear if it was in self-defense or if she really was innocent. He just presses the button with a quip. Nothing happens. Until the police come in and arrest him. It's over. Talbot is stopped, and just in time. The death penalty has been reinstated. He's dragged just like Charlie was to the chair, begging and screaming for his life, sure the governor will pardon him. No call comes in, however. Midnight strikes. He's all strapped in. His replacement flips the switch. A monster they created is silenced by other monsters. Then we get the Crypt Keeper again with his hilarious commentary. I love him. The puns aren't as top tier in this episode as they will become down the line, but he's still so delightful. And there's a lot here to love, in fact. Once again, these shots are so good. Cinematography on point. Talbot was chilling. He gave off real American Psycho but country vibes. Also, the narrative loop, starting with an electrocution and ending with one. It's a tight, well-crafted story that uses the runtime well. A very solid first episode that reminds me why I loved the show when I was a kid. I will definitely be returning to this series. It easily earns 4 happy foxes. Finally, we're at our third show, Creepshow. The most recent, and still ongoing, of the trio. Creepshow was originally an anthology film from 1982, and an homage to the classic horror comics of the 50s, including Tales from the Crypt. It's easy to see the inspiration in the host's design, let alone there being a host. Unlike the Crypt Keeper, however, Creep here is silent, eerie. Creep finding a trunk of comics is a great opening, with fantastic lighting and shots that set the mood well. And then we get one of those modern openings that try to act elevated, but at least it's short. I do love when we get to the comic book parts, introducing our first short, Gray Matter. Yes, unlike the other two, this is a 45-minute episode broken into 2 shorts per episode. In Gray Matter, we follow a few characters of a small town who did not evacuate during a hurricane, so they're hunkering down. Except one kid who breaks the weather to get his daddy beer. At the store are Dixie, the shop owner, Doc, and the chief of police. And they talk to the boy who admits he's afraid to go home. His daddy has changed. He's sick. He pleads to not go back. Dixie tells him to stay while Doc and Chief head to the home to check on his father. Dixie gets him talking. After his mother's death, his father hit the booze heavy. So bad, he was caught drinking at work and got fired. Things start getting weird, though. There's a strange slime coating things his father has touched, a foul odor, a sensitivity to light. An intense sensitivity. He does not stop drinking. Then, as Chief and Doc reach the home, we learn of what exactly Daddy turned into. The home is unbearably hot, and at first, Daddy is nowhere to be found. Just the aftermath of something. Timmy details the horrific scene he came home to one day. We don't see the full transformation yet. Not until Timmy admits that his father's hunger went from beer to animals to humans. Finally, we see what Daddy has become in full. A grotesque, gelatinous creature that consumes by touch and can multiply. Chief doesn't make it. Doc runs back to the shop in its panic. Dixie does the math. In 6 days, it'll be the end of everything as Daddy keeps growing in size and appetite. An arm bursts in to punctuate the revelation, dragging Doc up to be consumed. A solid first short. It was based on a short story by Stephen King of the same name. The cinematography was fantastic. We got some great, disgusting shots. Speaking of disgusting, oh man, that body horror. Delicious. I'll say I wasn't too impressed by the monster itself when we saw it in all its glory, but it was serviceable, if a bit generic. Still, the build-up is great, and I loved the moments when we would get comic book sound effects thrown in, or the panel transitions. Just great presentation. Between segments, our host is back, laughing and drinking a beer. It's fun. Then we're on to the House of the Head. A little girl is obsessed with her giant dollhouse, taking care of it and the doll family within. She loves the Smiths dearly. But one day, when she goes to check in on them, there's something new. A decapitated, gruesome head. The other dolls are moved, as well, like they're in fear of the new resident. There's something wet and red on the head as well. She isn't sure how the head got there, but she's sure it's got to leave. Later that evening when she returns to the dollhouse, there's been more movement. The parents are coming down the stairs with worried faces. The head is lounging on the couch. The dog is outside looking in sadly while the child cowers in the kitchen. Looking away for a moment gives the head time to move again. Now it's on the bed, just staring out. Evie declares the Smiths haunted. She gets a police officer at the miniature shop that made the dollhouse. The family are in the kitchen looking like they're praying. She puts the officer in, promising that he'll get to the bottom of this issue. It's jarring to see the parents so amused by her suddenly praying while she's so distressed. A distress that only grows as she checks in on the family. The officer is in the attic, investigating. An investigation that ends with him losing his own head. The dollmaker doesn't have a priest or a rabbi, so she gets a Native American instead. She gives him time to do his thing, and when she returns, he's on the hunt. Evie gazes around the dollhouse for signs of the head. She only catches the aftermath of the hunt, and the warrior did not win. Next, the Smiths fall, parents first. Then she sees the child whose head has been replaced by the creature haunting them. In a fit of panic, she grabs the head and throws it out of the dollhouse. She can't leave it unguarded like that, however, and searches around. Under the bed, she sees that it's grown and shoves it back into the house before running to her bed. She can't handle it anymore and decides to sell the house. We get a final shot of the head, small again, on the child's body. I really enjoyed this one. The tension was high, even though it was just dolls getting murdered. And they still felt like real living people, and you could feel Evie's distress and horror at what was happening. I will say the ending was a bit lackluster. Passable, but I wanted more, especially with how good the rest of the short was. Of course, our host returns to remind us to check out the next episode, and I will be. Overall, another good, solid watch that makes me want to check out more episodes. I suppose the point of comparing these three is to rate them against each other and see who comes out on top. I'm bad at that sometimes. Or maybe these three are just such strong contenders that, while it makes sense to pit them against each other, it's a hard battle. Hammer House of Horror is definitely for the gothic horror lovers out there. Romantically dark, a little salacious and titillating, certainly full of emotions. Tales from the Crypt is a classic for a reason. Plenty of laughs between the screams, delves into human nature and showing the dark side of our seedy society. Never missing an opportunity for a pun. Creepshow is more than just a throwback. It's a solid modern anthology series built on the backs of true horror greats. A horror host in this day and age? We have to appreciate that. Honestly, I'd recommend all 3. At least these first episodes. All captivating in their own ways. Well, that's it for me. I'm not opposed to doing this again. There are a lot of horror anthology TV shows out there after all. See what else we can unearth, good or bad. Thanks for joining My Lucid Screaming.